Well, I think what we'll do is get started here. If we can get people to sit down and I think we need to get this thing on the road here. Yeah, okay. All right. Well, welcome to the induction ceremony of two very special people, Gordon and Marilyn Herreid. I've known them for decades of time. They, I'd be blunt, a crucial part of my getting started in geology. I have a personal prejudice here, but they are remarkable people because they, geological research, mining, agriculture, cultural development, and they were an inseparable couple. And I want to talk to you a little bit as I go through this PowerPoint. I'm going to try to highlight the things that I've completed my research on. Okay. And there, but for the first 5 or 10 minutes, I'd like to talk to all of you about what the Alaska Mining Hall of Fame is, because many of you probably don't know what it is. And we'll go from there. Here's the program. I'll start with the introduction of what the Mining Hall of Fame is. Then we'll proceed to the presentation of Gordon and Marilyn Herreid. Then there's going to be a coffee break. It may be 15 or 20 minutes long. And then after that coffee break, then we will open up to the audience here recollections of both Gordon and Marilyn and take it from there. And I apologize, a little bit disjointed here, but this is on a different computer right now than I had, and sometimes things get bounced around a little bit, but we'll get through that okay. So what is the Alaska Mining Hall of Fame? We started more than 25 years ago. We are a 501c3 operation. We were incorporated on April 27th, 1997. We really are here to honor outstanding individuals that play a role in the development of Alaska's mineral industry. We think that you have to really get to know and understand these people to see how important they were to the whole culture of every aspect of the mineral industry. We've inducted more than 130 people since 1997. We hold induction ceremonies just like this, not just in Fairbanks, but also in Anchorage and Juneau and Nome. And we just did another one in Craig on Prince of Wales Island just last week, actually. We publish a newsletter. You've seen this about Gordon and Marilyn. It's highlighted here. And most importantly, we have a website, alaskamininghall-of-fame.org. If you hit that, you'll punch it right up, and you'll read more about all aspects of our organization. We get about 55,000 hits a month up from over 100 countries. So we are spread out, and we're constantly making minor edits and changes when people say, it's a great thing, but you got that date wrong, and we fix it. It actually does happen. This is the board of directors. Myself, June McAtee, who now lives in Oregon, Clark Milne in Fairbanks here, Travis Hudson in Sitka, Sandra Miskovich in California, Carl Hahnemann here in town, Bill Tweed in Nome, Mike Satry in Juneau, and Rob Rutherford in Anchorage. So we're split out. We're not just all Fairbanks people. We usually do inductions by themes. We honored pioneers pre-1867 gold rush, before the gold rush. We've honored people that were traders and prospectors along the Yukon and Kuskokwim rivers before the gold was found and discovered. We honored people associated with the Juneau area long before Felix Pedro stepped in this area. We've honored people from the Alaska Yukon gold rush period, government employees involved in mineral development. There's been more than a few that have been inducted here. Pioneers associated with dredging, mining entrepreneurs, People in the legal profession, we've inducted a number of lawyers. Well, you got to have a good lawyer to make it work in mining, and that's always been fun and interesting to do that, actually. And then people associated with the development of critical and strategic minerals. And there's been quite a few developed up here, more than 10 commodities over a period of time. And then people in public service, minorities in mining, and women in mining. And those are the kind of themes we have when we have induction ceremonies. In short, we help personify the history of mining through people. And I think that people help tell the story about what mining has been in Alaska. And I just, this facility was opened on October 8, 2022. We were just opening it up, and someone was in town politicking. His name was Governor Dunleavy, and he just asked if he could come by. So we said, sure. And they came by and helped cut us the ribbon and got the thing started. Just an example of the kind of things we do. This was the induction of someone from Ireland that came to the New World and spent time in the 40-mile area on Napoleon Creek, and even before, married into the country, very successful miner. Many years later, she went back to Ireland and established an educational trust fund in a school system in Ireland. And it worked, and it still is operational today. Bridget Albert is her name. This is just an example. It was a Zoom meeting, just like here in 2023. And suddenly she's in all the newspapers in Ireland. And people had Zoomed in and saw it. And actually it was given, this presentation was not given here. It was given from Ireland. They were doing it across. And we just have found out recently that Bridget has been inducted into the Irish Women's Hall of Fame. So it's just kind of interesting and neat. We want to honor Mary Anita Nordale. She was a founding board member of the Mining Hall of Fame. She did all of her bylaws work and articles of incorporation. She was the president for more than 10 years, and we miss her. And we have received significant donations from very, very many people, honoring her legacy here in the organization, and actually everything else that she did for the people of Alaska, which is too numerous to mention at this presentation. What do we do since the first of the year? We've had 15 different events, educational stuff, nonprofits meeting here, organizations like AMA, Fairbanks branch. We had Fairbanks Coin Club uses this thing, Fairbanks Genealogical Society. We've great talks here. We've had almost 500 people show up since January 1st. And that's really an important function of this building, besides having tourists come through during the summer and fall. The big hit was Paul Krejci giving his lecture on the Black music in Fairbanks. It was a filled out crowd, just like we're seeing right now. It was a really outstanding presentation by a noted musician here in town. And this is just what it kind of looked like. We didn't have to do too much advertising for this, that people really showed up for that. Just last week, I was in Craig on Prince of Wales Island. What they wanted to do was do a re-inauguration of people we inducted in November in Anchorage. Two pioneers from Southeast Alaska, Wendell Dawson and Kelly Adams. You probably don't know who they are, but Wendell is the namesake of the Dawson gold mine, which is in production. And Kelly Adams was the guy that found the uranium, thorium, rare earth element deposit at Bocan Mountain. We were invited there by the Craig Tribal Council. There was a nice little crowd there. It was real nice to have that happen. Now let's get back to Gordon and Marilyn Herreid. They helped me start my career in earth science. I mean, I can't say more about it. I'm not even sure if I'd have been a geologist without interacting with Gordon So I'll have to tell you, I'm prejudiced. I'll have to tell you right off the top. And Marilyn was amazing. One of the reasons why we don't always induct husband and wife teams, but in this case, it was absolutely justified because they were inseparable. And Marilyn was in most of the field camps that when Gordon did his work throughout Alaska for the Division of Mines and Minerals of the state of Alaska and later literally DGGS, she was always there. She loved being out there. I know her kids knew that she loved being there. It was amazing. She had more fun in those camps than any of us, even in all the rain on Prince of Wales Island. It was amazing. So here's the timeline. Early years, Gordon was born in Santa Maria, California, from a family of Norwegian immigrants. Marilyn was born in St. Charles, Illinois. She grew up in an academic setting, friends, music. She was a noted piano player really early in her life. Gordon served in the 10th Mountain Division during the Second World War. They trained at Camp Hale in Colorado. They went over to Italy, and you'll see some pictures here in 1944. Gordon was nearly killed in battle and spent months in rehabilitation. I remember him telling me once around a campfire, he didn't talk about it much, but a lot of the guys that he trained with in Camp Hale were killed in that counteroffensive that the Germans put on, and it was a tough time for him. When Gordon came north to Alaska, when he was convalescing from his injuries in the Army, he just made a statement: I'm gonna climb Mount McKinley, and that was his goal, and he did. And he also climbed Mount Logan Mount McKinley in 1948, Mount Logan in 1950. Those are the two tallest mountains on the North American continent, and he is the first man to climb both of them. And a lot of his friends don't even know that, but he was. He enrolled in geology at the University of Alaska and graduated in 1949. Marilyn had attended a Grinnell College in Iowa. She was a pre-med major there. And then she transferred to the University of Alaska and continued her education. And she actually had a degree in pre-med at the University of Alaska, the first degree in pre-med of this institution up on the hill. This is a picture of Gordon Herreid in the field uniform of the 10th Mountain Division. Picture on the right shows Gordy on the far left, and he was training with his buddies. And these are from slides, and they're kind of goofed up. They're really old slides. I didn't dare try to clean them because I thought I'd damage them. So I just scanned them, and I didn't do anything else. And, yeah, I have pictures from him, but doesn't have him in them. Where the GI guys were climbing up cliffs with a rifle on their back. I mean, literally climbing up a cliff. And so, and it was dramatic. But Gordon wasn't in those, so I haven't shown him on these things. These are pictures to let you know, and we're still doing the details of the research on this, but what I have found out in 1948, he had climbed Mount McKinley successfully. However, there's some extras that we have to figure out. Actually, his first ascent that year, people on his team got air sickness or altitude sickness, and they had to quit, but he didn't want to quit. So he went back up with another group and got to the top. And so, and I don't have pictures of Denali here. You've probably seen them, but you probably haven't seen so many pictures of Mount Logan. In 1950, there was 5 climbers that Gordy put together. And you see the man on the left, Mark Christensen. There's a long letter about how it all occurred. They all wore packs that weighed exactly 80 pounds. And they had to walk in nearly 50 miles from the mouth of the Chittenden Glacier all the way up the Chittenden Glacier, then up Logan Glacier, then across to Ogilvie Glacier, and finally getting into the saddle between King Peak and Mount Logan, and then mounting the Mount Logan from the south. It's kind of amazing when you think about it to carry that kind of a pack. And they were walking over mountains and hills and crossing rivers with an 80-pound pack on their back. So Education, courtship, marriage, both Marilyn and Gordy attended the University of Alaska, as I've said. They something very, very important to their lives and maybe the lives of many others is President Bonnell of the University of Alaska really liked Gordon and Marilyn. They really kind of thought they were special. And so he sold them 160 acres of land, just north of the university. And we all know that as dog patch. That's kind of what's on the topo maps. If you look at it, dog patch. So, and what he did was they started to sell some of that land to people they liked, and they liked musicians and artists and scientists and a whole group of people. And it became almost a cultural setting for special people. And I've seen it, and it's really a special part of Fairbanks, in my opinion. Anyways, they got married in 1950. Gordy began geological consulting. He worked with a number of people, nickel prospecting and mining in Canada and in the United States. He worked around Kluane Lake. He worked in the eastern part of Canada, the nickel province. He also, and I'll show you some slides here, he hit a WAE designation with the United States Geological Survey. And he worked for Clyde Hoftig. He worked for a number of people, Hank Berg and Ed McKevant and Pete Sainsbury and others. And Bill Broget and Herb Collier, he worked for all these guys partly because they knew he was an animal. He could carry a pack, and you didn't have to have a horse or a donkey or anything else. He got Gordon there, that's partly why they hired him. And then he went to graduate school at the University of California, Berkeley. I'll talk a little bit about that. And in February 1958, he accepted the chief geologist position of the Red Devil mine in Southwest Alaska, where he was for about 3.5 years. So let me go. This is a picture of some of the people in Dogpatch. Gordy, he loved to ski. He was special. And Woody Wood, Jenny Wood, Celia Hunter, they were all part of the deal. And they were all very close and good friends. And yeah. And so when they got married, Marilyn knew Otto Geist, good friend. Of course, Otto gave Marilyn to Gordy, at the wedding. I'll show you Otto Geist. He was famous for his Pleistocene paleontologist, managing all the stuff that was going off to the museums on the East Coast of the United States. They were very close. In fact, the first place that Gordon and Marilyn stayed was this little old cabin on Dead Man's Slough, just off the Chena there. It was a tiny little place, and that's where they stayed, I think, almost 2 years. Picture on the left there is Gordy Herreid at Berkeley. He entered the graduate school there. He studied under a world-famous petrologist by the name of Francis Turner, who wrote textbooks on igneous and metamorphic petrology. He also studied with a number, Charles Meyer, who was a porphyry copper expert. He took a lot of economic geology. Something happened though. He just, and this happens in life, we all have to admit this, that he just didn't quite get along with Turner. They didn't see eye to eye. So he finished up with a master's program, master's in geology, and got back into the consulting business, is what he did basically. The picture on the right just shows you Bill Brochet and Gordy up there on Hunt Fork in the Brooks Range. He and a weasel right behind him, that they used that as a vehicle in those days. Pete Sainsbury was the number of letters I've looked at. I've always been told there was contentious relationships between Pete and Gordy, but actually, if you read those letters, they really liked each other. They were very special, and Gordy liked Pete and Pete liked Gordy. I mean, they stayed in communication for many, many years. Gordon and Marilyn Herreid bought an airplane, a Luscombe, 1952. And the reason why they had an airplane is just because they're going back and forth from Alaska to California, back to East Coast, Toronto, where he's doing some work, Vancouver. And that's kind of how they got around in that time period. And Gordon was a very able pilot when he was driving this airplane around. This is a picture of the Red Devil Mercury antimony mine in 1959. people don't realize it, but the mining industry was in steep decline in the 1950s. The price of gold was fixed. The hard rock copper mines were gone. The dredges were shutting down, and there wasn't a whole lot going on, but there was one important mine in the Kuskokwim Basin that had both antimony and mercury in it. It was the Defense Minerals Exploration Administration actually reopened this mine because of the strategic needs of these commodities. It was reopened in 1953 or 1952 and stayed open really intermittently till about 1970. Gordon was there for 3 years and really helped really map the thing and make it understandable in a geologic sense. This is a pictures on the left. It's Red Devil miners celebrating Christmas. It's kind of a cute little picture. Walt, Gretchen, and Ingrid, you know, cross-country skiing, the Red Devil. Gordy Herreid underground there. It's one of the few pictures I was able to get when he was working underground at Red Devil. And then a quote, when I was working out of Nixie Mellick's place in the Kuskokwim, he just said that the Herreid family brought cross-country skiing into the country. I mean, nobody was cross-country skiing before they got there. And afterwards, people started cross-country skiing. I mean, he brought that kind of into the culture. Gordon Herreid was Alaska's first state geologist. And I want to say a few comments about this. You know, Alaska became a 49th state in 1959. The DNR, the Department of Natural Resources, was composed of 4 divisions: Division of Lands, Division of Agriculture, Division of Economic and Tourist Development, and Division of Mining and Minerals. And you know, DMEM was kind of a super division because it was so important to the early years because they were looking for revenue. How are we going to run this state? And it actually managed oil and gas stuff as well. It had assayers employed and engineers to go out and help miners keep from going under. And in 1960, DMEM Director Jim Williams saw that there was just a shortcoming. There was really no geologist in state employment. And he said, we got it. You know, we have to have geological expertise. We can't depend on the USGS for everything. We have to have a state geological survey. That's what basically, and it's all stated, by the way, it's all in writing in letters that I picked up. So DMEM began to look for a qualified professional to fit the schools of a state geologist. Kirk Stanley, some of you know in the minerals business, in those days, he was pretty important. He had a lot of clout. He told Jim Williams, you ought to hire Gordy Herreid. And then he wrote a letter to Gordon and said, you ought to apply for the job. That's kind of what happened. And so this is letters I've looked at. In a letter to Jim Williams, he's talking about the difficulties of mineral exploration needs. You know, it's too specific for the USGS, which generally do regional work. It's too general for mining companies. They don't fund mapping, for example. The state seems to be a logical one to handle the work in between, to produce geologic investigations within known mineral belts and districts. And he told Jim in this long letter, pages and pages long, he said, integrate all geological information, collect new data so that maps and information can help define mineral provinces, publish results, and build on others, thus spurring well-planned mineral exploration efforts. And then the reply back was almost immediately, Jim says, I have received very few letters with so much good thoughts in them. He got the job. And and here's what he told Gordon, because Gordon was supposed to show up on July 1st, 1961 in Juneau, design a state geological survey set up within the Division of Mines and Minerals so that I can see that we're in cooperation between geologists and engineers. I'm disappointed I can only hire one, but one's better than nothing. And that's how it all got started, really. One of the things that helped jumpstart it was Gordon, an issue of the December 1961 Mining Engineering completely devoted the whole thing to Alaska. Every article in the thing was on Alaska. There were 15 different articles. And Gordon was the leadoff hitter on that. the geology and ore deposits of Alaska. He's only been employed by the state for 6 months, and he publishes this outstanding summary. If you ever read that, it's a long time ago for plate tectonic and for modern, thoughts, but it was really well written. And I think that really helped convince Jim Williams and others in the state system, hire more people. And that's exactly what he was able to do. And here's what was Gordon's contribution toward building a state geological survey presence within DNR? Well, one of the important things he did, by the way, is he hired 4 top-notch geological professionals: Don Richter, Art Rose, Mo Kaufman, and Tom Marshall. And now let me explain. Who were these guys? Well, Don Richter, if you know anything, he was probably the best regional geologic mapper that ever worked in Alaska. And that's my personal opinion. It was outstanding work whenever he did work. Art Rose was an outstanding geochemist. He later ran the geochemistry programs at Pennsylvania State University. He's published books at Penn State. He's a famous man on the East Coast of the United States. Well, he got his start here as a geologist for the state of Alaska. Mo Kaufman, who was he? He found the Denali prospect. And there's a lot of controversies about that, what happened there. I'm not going to go into all that detail, but that project is probably one of the most important things that a state geologist found. It's still there. It's still worked on. It's growing in size. It's right off the Denali Highway. It's pretty close to the railroad tracking. And then finally, Tom Marshall. Who's Tom Marshall? Well, Tom Marshall, in 1963, using analogs about oil and gas basins in Canada, convinced the state of Alaska to select lands on Alaska's North Slope. I mean, that's what he did. And he used geological analogs. It was all professional. And he even told people there's something called the Barrel Arch, and you need to get land right there at the Barrel Arch. And because it was so well done, they believed them, and the decision was to select that land. And so you have to understand, and Gordy put these guys together. And that's what I've always thought, that one of the things beside his own great work was putting a real team together. He wasn't just a manager that sat around and did nothing. He actually published 19 reports for DMEM and successor agencies. He was the most prolific of all the geologists of the group that he ran. He published 7 reports in Southeast Alaska. He published 7 reports from the Nome, Solomon, O'Malley, Candle, and Imshuk districts of the Seward Peninsula. He got out and looked at the Nixon Fork mine and Sithel-Medcat Lake areas of interior Alaska. And then he worked in the Wrangell Mountains. He worked in the Western Alaska Range, and he worked in the Iliamna district. That guy was everywhere, and he published his results. And if I don't know, there's people, the geologists that sitting in the room, just ask what kind of quality. They were always outstanding quality maps. They really were. I wanted to point out, Gordon embraced modern geological concepts in the formation of mineral deposits. He was really and here in 1963, he looked at a little copper mine that was mined at the turn of the 19th century called Niblek Anchorage, just west of Ketchikan. It's not very far away. And he's describing it. And after detailed work, he's saying, it's parallel to bedding. It's not controlled by faults. Strong stratigraphic control. It resembles those in a district in Spain, which was believed to be as sulfide precipitation on the seafloor and on ancient submarine volcanoes. He says this in 1964. Well, none of that. That's a volcanogenic massive sulfide deposit, but it took another 7 or 8 years for people to really recognize this is an important deposit, like Greens Creek in Southeast Alaska. But he was ahead of his time. He also described the Alaska Juneau Gold Mine. He looked at he loved to do detail crawling along the outcrops along the beach, and this is a product of regional metamorphism, and he stated it in his reports. And nobody was thinking of orogenic gold deposits at that time, but he stated it in his report, Geologic Report number 1 of the Division of Mines and Minerals, published in 1962. It was amazing foresight that he had about metallogenesis and how it works. These are just pictures. Marilyn, near a granite outcrop at Sythlamink Lake. And, you know, I looked at these pictures. She's in all the pictures. She's in all the areas where he works. Art Rose, working with Gordon near the Deskin Formation near Hollis in southeast Alaska. The O'Malley mine in the Eastern Seward Peninsula. This, by the way, is the first base metal mine in Alaska's history. They actually shipped out concentrates to a market in, I think, Japan in 1879, you know, before the Juneau Gold Belt. And then Gordon taking notes in the Chinook River area near Nome. You know, he saw, you know, he discovered a zinc property in the Aurora Creek Basin, which has been looked at for many others. Remember, he's looking for reasons why Alaska needs to develop a mining industry, you know, get jobs, revenues, et cetera, and he took that job quite seriously. So there was a change took place in 1967, and Earl Beislein, the dean of the school up on top, and the College of Earth Science and Mineral Industries, convinced the Hickel administration to move DMEM to Fairbanks. It was in Anchorage completely. And it was a good argument. Earl said, look, the University of Alaska's here. There's a new outfit called the Mineral Industry Research Lab. They're doing a lot of great work. They're doing a lot of advanced analytical work. They're setting up a age dating facility. A guy named Don Turner is going to run it. He hadn't arrived yet. He said, let's get together, integrate this group with the university. And the Hickel administration bought into that concept. And that's what they did. And so some of the people working in Anchorage, they didn't want to leave. Don decided eventually to go to the USGS. Art Rose got a job offer at Penn State University. He took it. Mo Kaufman had left a couple of years earlier, but it changed everything. But Marilyn and Gordon, they saw it's great. Get back to Fairbanks. Start to develop Dogpatch. He had all these wonderful contacts up here, and then I'm home. Basically, is what he said. And I started working with just a field assistant about this time. Gordy finished off his Chinook River work and Chinook River area just west of Nome. He would actually, I'll talk to you about, he was in Cominco, started looking at his stuff, and they were very interested in that area. And he had made close ties, and he knew some of the very people that were drilling holes in the Red Dog property 15 years later. And actually the first work that Cominco did in Alaska was at the Chinook River area and did some core drilling. His last effort was in the Craig A2 quadrangle of southeast Alaska. And that's where I step in. That's when he picked me up and actually taught me how to geologic map that we want. And after he finished all that, he retired from state service. He'd been in for about 15 years. And I'll show you a few pictures of when I started working with him. These are in the Craig Quad. The reason why they were working down there was some interest in selecting lands for the state in that part of southeast Alaska. It's an old copper mining camp. These are pictures of the mines that, it's easy to develop a mine in southeast because, you're so close to tidewater. You just get it down to tidewater, get it onto a boat, and off it goes to Tacoma or something like that, see? And so we worked on these areas. I just wanted to show you a few pictures how he worked. Here, I'm a guy, I didn't know these people. I didn't know Gordon and Marilyn, and they like to rough it. I mean, it's just hard to explain that. They could have been leasing out a logging camp or, sitting on something on a platform. No, they're going to camp. They're going to camp in a rainforest. And that's exactly what they did. They had these little Zodiac boats, and because there's inlets all over the place, we'd kind of move these camps around and do the detailed geology. And then camps, they always set up these gigantic visqueen tents. They were huge. And they took them, and there was a hole right in the middle of them, so you could build a fire underneath, and you could split up a cedar, and you could get warm, and you could dry yourself out after a whole day of this sopping wet, and do your stuff. One of the things that Marilyn did for me was when I'd get back sopping wet and everything on me was sopping wet, she'd get my field notes and my maps and she'd dry everything out. she says, if you don't dry them out, you're going to lose the data. And she was exactly right. And so that every day, next morning, all the stuff's dried and we go out again. The picture on the lower left is Marilyn next to an old copper mine right at Tidewater. It was shipped a small amount of high-grade copper ore again because it's in an inlet area. A big boat come along, you just ship out, you just dump the stuff into the boat, and off it goes to Tacoma. So it's relatively easy and simple and straightforward to do that. At the end of this 3-year campaign, Gordy hired a little helicopter company, Kenny Eichner, a famous aviator from the Ketchikan. He had this little Hughes 269 machine, and he would clean up the map. Basically, he had wherever you could not walk to, there were areas that, you could get it with a helicopter, but he wanted to get everything you possibly could on foot. That's just the way he operated. He was a detailed mapper, and that's just the way he did things. So we hired this guy out, Kenny, and those little 269s, they run on they look like they're fan belts, on the rotor, and you ask him what's going to happen when those little fan belts breaks, and he said, well, it probably wouldn't be very good. So it didn't break, and we got through it all. Some of the pictures, high-grade molybdenite mineralization in the skarns around Copper Mountain, very interesting, some of the best grade moly I've ever seen. Gordon and Marilyn talking to these epidote crystal miners in Green Monster Mountain, a big skarn zone around an intrusion where it's full of epidote crystals. They found a cluster of epidote, Lee Miles and Virgil Giles, that was up there when we were up there, and in a cavity, and they sold those epidote crystals for $45,000 to a museum on the East Coast. Remember, this is 1972, and so the claims were owned by Eskil Anderson, and these guys leased it from Eskil Anderson. So but I was amazed, and they were beautiful. But these are some of the best epidote crystals you can get anywhere in the world. So it's just a very interesting sideline for a small scale mining operation. So retirement and into the arts. When he retired, they were always active members of the Fairbanks art community. Right after retirement, I think he spent a year or so just kind of wandering around, thought he would want to build a cabin near Healy, decided not to do it, but they created Pearl Creek Farm in the dog patch area. They had Monday night sketch groups at their house and other places involving people like Bill Berry. I was there a couple times, and Bill was there, and he was a very active part of it. Hosted many meetings for Quakers. They loved art, and they encouraged young artists to succeed. There was many people, artists of that time era, that knew Gordon and Marilyn Herreid. There's no question about that. Found the whole art store on College Road, and in 1978, with 2 other couples, formed Canada Valley Farmers Market, the one we see that's active every summer. I remember when they first got started, it was right there at the corner of College and University or Farmers Loop, and they had a little shack there, and I visited them there, and that was when they first got started, when they started selling Gordy's vegetables, and then later they teamed up with a couple other groups and started this venture. So these are just as I wind this down. I remember that strawberry thing. I used to go out there and get strawberries from him. I don't have pictures of Gordon on his tractor. He used to love to drive that tractor around. It was a big deal for him. He got right in the beat, and he got pretty good mechanic. I mean, he was not bad at all. And the other thing he did was he got really big into, he bought a motorbike, and every fall and winter he'd go down and he'd visit farms all over the place. Washington State, Idaho. I think he got as far east as North Dakota, and he wanted to get ideas about how to be a good farmer. And he was really into learning new things about life, I think. Picture on the low is Marilyn inspecting the produce, and then a picture, of course, down in the lower right is the Tanana Valley Farmers Market. It's undated. So, and talked to him a lot. He still stayed in contact with geology. I'd see him at Copeland and Sauna once in a while. He asked me, one of the things he asked me was, in the early 80s, is this Red Dog thing for real? And I said, yes, it's for real. I mean, it's a very important deposit. It's years before it was actually put in production, but it's a good one. Because see, he knew the same guys at Cominco that were at Aurora Creek. He kind of knew them, and he's wondering if this was just a big show or a big promotion or something very real. And I said, it's very real, Gordy. So Gordy's passing. He lived an adventurous life, both physical and intellectual, but his life became ever increasingly difficult because he was diagnosed with Huntington's disease, the same disease that his mother had, Florence, and she died of that disease. I could see it progressive over years. It was a progressive thing. It took place over at least 10 years. Maybe the family here could talk a little bit more about that, but he still was active. He went to the Fairbanks Community Food Bank. He volunteered a lot. He did farm work whenever he could. He really couldn't drive around anymore, but he just kept active as much as he could. And then the last 10 days of his life, three great women, Kay, Debbie, Ursula, I remember that, they were there, and his granddaughter, Sabe, played the cello when he passed away. And he passed away in a very blissful state and left us all. Marilyn's passing, she continued on for another 17 years. She died at the age of 89. She was continued very active in the arts community. I think many of you know that. Although when they were operating Pearl Creek Farm, she was actually a pretty good gardener herself. She was a pretty good farmer herself, actually, and maybe better than Gordy was in some ways. She died of a stroke and decided to stay at home for the last week of her life. And her relative, her daughters, Gretchen and Ingrid, were there, grandchildren, Radar and Sabe, and son-in-law, Dick Peterson. And that's how she passed away. So, I think what we want to do right now is take a break and have something to eat, maybe 15 minutes, and come back. And then one of the most important things about these induction ceremonies is people get up and talk about, in this case, Gordon and Marilyn Herreid. So let's just break for about 15 minutes and come back. So it'd be hard to get this started again. If we could get started again.
Finish the intermission.
Yeah.
Okay.
End of intermission.
Yeah.
We get started. Let's just get in the audience here. If we can. Okay. Would anybody like to get up and say something about Marilyn and Gordon Herreid? Here, we have a speaker here. If you come up and say a few words. Who wants to? Maybe Sam might want to. Okay. All right. Okay. I guess I'll start it off. I started my mapping career with Gordon. It's me in the left there. I was at the portal of the old Copper City mine, and I didn't know. Gordon just says, well, you need to learn how to map underground. Don Drybeck says you can map, and he knew Don real well. And I said, okay, well, I'll try. Kind of mapped it with a flashlight, and but he checked it all, and everything went well. Picture on the right, Gordy was a very creative guy, an inventor. We had some time off on a place called Clackass Lake. It was a great cutthroat trout lake in southeast Alaska. But we didn't have a boat or anything. He says, I'll help out on that. He actually made that thing. And he said it was a visqueen boat. And get visqueen at the bottom of it, going out there, Tom, and go fishing. Well, the only thing I can tell you is that I got back safely to shore. And in the bottom here, I just throw out, there's some of you geologists here, and you probably can't see it. Gordon was a fanatical petrographic, he looked at thin sections. And Gordy was not critical very much of people. I mean, he didn't criticize, but he did have a hang up. Some of his colleagues had published maps and they didn't look at a single thin section. He says, I don't know how you can do that. Because you do not understand rock types unless you look at a thin section. And he was a fanatic about it. And he looked at thousands of thin sections. And he loved petrographic microscopes. And of course, he got right into modern geochemical analyses to help understand it. And I can really sympathize now after so many years because private clients still want you to look at thin sections. It's not a lost art. And that's just the way Gordy felt about it his whole career. So who else would like to talk about Gordon or Marilyn? Come up here.
I lived up near the Gordons up in Dogpatch and was hired as a geologist with the State Survey in 1974. And that's where Milton Wiltsey, and met Gordy at DGGS. And I had just started to learn how to ski in Colorado, cross-country ski, and I found out that Gordy was skiing back and forth from his house to the office on the campus. So I thought, well, I can do that. And that was back when winters were really cold and 50 degrees cold. In fact, my wife frostbit her fanny one time being out in that cold. And but we went over there. Mainly we came back from work together, but we skied in separately. But of course it was dark going and it was dark coming back. And I got a headlight like the mushers use so I could see where I was going. And so the first night that we were going to come back from there together, I turned that light on and Gordy says, turn that thing out. That's like skiing in a tunnel. Said that's no good. And so Gordy goes flying off down this trail and I'm back there banging off trees on both sides trying to keep up with it. And I didn't have the night vision he had, but I did find out that skis leave a triboluminescent trail from pressure on the snow when it's cold. And I finally got so I could sort of stay with him coming back. Eventually stopped skiing in because there were too many driveways to cross. That was first adventure with Gordy. I was interested to learn that he had studied under Turner. And I, in a sense, studied under Turner because I bought his book. There's a petrologic book, Turner and Verhoeven. It was the worst damn book I ever read on petrology. And so the fact that Gordy didn't get along with Turner, I thought, well, yeah, that's about right. I'll give you a great price on that book. If you I still got it, but I don't use it. And then there's a story that I heard about Gordy, and I think maybe Tom could verify this or say that I heard the story wrong, but it's a story between an interaction of Gordy and Pete Sainsbury of the USGS that took place out on the Seward Peninsula. And Pete Sainsbury was a USGS geologist, and he was a Piper Cub pilot and thought he was pretty hot. And he tried a lot of weird and very dangerous things to do geochem sampling from a Piper Cub, including cutting a hole in the bottom of the plane and dropping a line with a gummy substance on the end of it and swooping in over the ground and dropping that line and plucking up chips of rock. And then to do biologic sampling, he'd fly over treetops with a cutter between the wheels and snip off the ends of spruce trees and pull them into the cabin. And then he would fly around, and he had a inclinometer in the plane. And so one day, Gordy and his people were back in camp, and Sainsbury put his plane down on the beach, and he was sort of chiding Gordy about, you're walking out every day and you're covering just a little tiny patch of ground. I've mapped so many square miles today, and you're just puddling around in this little area. And he kept it up too long, and they came to blows out there. And I don't know who ended up on top. Sainsbury was a pretty rugged guy himself, but it's the first time I ever heard of geologists actually getting physical about a disagreement. But
Thanks for sharing that, Bill.
But I want to say that
I've got to get
Pete
it.
and Gordy were close. They were very close friends. But yeah, that was true. Anybody else? Come on up.
Say, maybe I do. Come around this way.
Yeah.
Okay.
And try to,
Um,
don't trip on that thing.
I'll try not to. My name is Paolo Greer. Funny first name, Paolo. Although he doesn't speak Italian, and I just ask,
Put it close to your mouth.
put it close to my mouth. I just ask, can I put this close to my mouth? By the way, tell me if I mess up. Where Gordy was wounded, and it was Riva Ridge. And why that's interesting is I was just there. Riva Ridge is right next to Fanano, which is Felix Pedro's hometown. Actually, he lived about 6 kilometers from there. And when I first went to Fanano last year for 2.5 weeks, the director of the museum picked me up. It was closed, always closed. And he took me to the museum and opened it up. And the museum that we think is Felix Pedro Museum there it's all Gothic line. It was the battle that your father was wounded in. And it's full of helmets and boots that probably had bodies in them when they found him. And the fellow who's the expert, I thought was the main expert, but he's not there, who ran the museum, he wrote a small book on Felix Pedro, which you can't get. And frankly, he copied somebody else. And but he just finished his 3rd book on the Gothic line, where your father was wounded. Now, and that was, the Gothic line is where the Germans held across northern Italy. And you've heard of a lot of battles in Italy in World War II. That was the battle. And that's kind of amazing that he came out of that one. In 1972, when Felix Pedro was exhumed in California and they brought his body back there, a bunch of Alaskans, some of you, I know Don Gray, probably went to Fanano. And for Felix his wife hid his body in California for 60 years. And it was, I won't get into the story, but they found him, brought him back there, and reburied him there. And I've been talking to the mayor of Fanano. Let's start a school. Keep this in mind. I want 10, 30, 40 Alaskans in the winter to go spend a week, 2 weeks, or a month here. They got the buildings, they got the hotels. You can check out the museum. And one day we teach Italian, every day we teach Italian and food and Felix Pedro and history and all that. By God, they got the history. But what a connection, Felix Pedro and your father, because Riva Ridge is, Felix Pedro grew up at the base of Riva Ridge. So anybody curious about more, I can tell you more later. Oh, thank you. Can I get out of here without tripping?
Who else? Oh, come on up.
My name is Randy Frank. My uncle, Henry Dobb, was with Gordon in Italy when they were fighting the Germans on skis. That's why he could ski so well. They were in the 10th Mountain Division that, fought their way up from the bottom of Italy up into the Alps against the Germans. It was terrible, terrible fighting. My uncle got wounded in the Purple Heart. Did Gordon get a Purple Heart too? No? Okay, well, anyways, so that was a real tough deal. But my uncle was one of the 3 people that climbed Mount McKinley with Gordon and Frank Sims. I have his climbing notes. I know I gave them to you already once.
Keep talking about that.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I have to find them first. But I know I have them because I copied them and gave them to her. So, yeah, my uncle used to talk about their trip up the mountain all the time, and he told me that they followed a professional climbing group who went up pretty fast, but they had oversupplied themselves, and so there was a lot of extra food for Gordon and Frank and my uncle Hank to use on the way up and back down. So they really lucked out there too. But yeah, I think that's just pretty cool. I had really no idea about that until my uncle told me. And he lived a little longer than Gordon did. He just died last October at 100 years old.
Anybody else? I'm sure there's someone else can come up and talk. Okay. Looks like we got some. Good. All right.
Thank you. My name is Jerry Cole. I was Gordon's geological field assistant in 1967. So I was second year out of the high school, and I was hired here in Fairbanks, but the family lived in Anchorage at the time, and I was graciously taken into the family and for several weeks there in Anchorage, and we had a few times I was hired to carry the rocks as his geological field assistant. But I picked up a number of stories, and it was just a great experience for me. And adding on to what Randy had to say, the stories I heard about climbing Mount McKinley was that your parents used to climb the steps up from the base of College Road up onto campus. Yeah, training with a backpack full of rocks, that Gordon was carrying, and that was the training time back and forth up and down the hill. And I understood that his foot gear for the climb was Little Abner boots, and I had my pa's old Little Abner boots that was felt and had the 2 buckles on the back side and no tread. And so I've always wondered, that was very slippery on snow, but that's what they had for foot gear. And what they had for sleeping was they had their individual army surplus mummy bags. And then they had 2 outer mummies, which is more the sack, and they zipped the sack together. So all 3 had the body heat of each other, and they conserved a lot of heat and very efficient in their expedition. And it seemed like it took forever to get back out, because the biggest challenge of the trip was fording the rivers on the way back out. That's the way I understood it. So he had plenty of stories, and it was just a pleasure to work with them and see the family in action with how they worked together and built the new house and dog patch. And I just value my time there with association with your family. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? Family, maybe? Okay,
I'm Heather Copeland, and I actually don't know a lot of this history, but I think everybody would be interested to know how about Herod's building houses. And they, and the kids will say, oh, yeah, 10 of them. Okay, so that's far more than I knew about. This is so neat because I grew up with your parents being sort of like secondary parents in ways to my family. And yet we learn so much more about them that we didn't know. But the houses that I was familiar with were the hexagon, right? That in the late 60s and early, about they were living in, and there weren't other buildings of that style at all that I ever heard of or saw anywhere around here. I mean, we had a few round buildings like Foodland and Joy School were built in 1957, which neat. And the center part was a gathering place where you could sit. Yeah, vertical logs. So, and we would have sketch groups, and Marilyn, of course, being a superb chef, would make a meal for whoever volunteered to be a model, and then we sit around and sketch, and it was such a friendly atmosphere. Of course, I didn't have to live with the inconveniences that shape apparently caused for other people sometimes, but and then they built a sort of barn type structure, just one room downstairs and one room upstairs. And then they built another house, which was Marilyn's final house. And okay, so those were I only knew 3 of the 10 houses they built, but I'm sure that's quite a story in itself. They were all unique and they were all friendly. They totally different from each other. Yeah. So yeah, I'm sure everybody will want to ask folks about that.
okay. You know, Paolo brought up about Felix Pedro and being so close to the Gothic line. There's another interesting aspect of Copeland that just talked, you know, that Copeland sauna and that part of that is Felix Pedro's cabin. That basically Nilo took it all apart and dragged it over to Chena Ridge and reconstructed it, and so that it doesn't look like it did when Pedro found his gold. But go ahead.
Actually, I think the Copeland house is the 3rd house those logs have been in, because it got Roman numerals etched into the original hand-hewn logs of Pedro's cabin to make it be rebuilt in another cabin. And then my father and mother got it from there, and some of the logs were rotten, so they had to replace them. But you can still see some of the Roman numerals etched into the logs to say how in the first move, they should have been rebuilt.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? Well, thanks for coming. Oh, go ahead. Now come on up. Yeah, go ahead and do it.
So my name is Gary Newman. I came up here to visit my sister in 71. And I was just finishing my degree at Berkeley, which was many years after Gordon did his. Mine was an undergrad. But she said, if you want to meet interesting people, go to the university and go to Copenhagen's Sunday night sauna. That was very true. And one of the people that was there was Gordon, and he would always bring popcorn. And everybody had a great time sitting around the dining room table, eating popcorn. And there was a border collie there named Micah. She loved popcorn. They never had to clean the floor afterwards. And as we kept interacting like we do in Fairbanks with a number of different activities, and like you all hear, one of the things that when they got the farm going, is Gordon gave us a couple of raspberry plants, little domestic raspberry plants. We planted them. I really don't even have to do a lawn anymore because they keep taking over. So I think about them every summer, and then the moose think about them every winter when they trim the tops. And then they mentioned the Monday night sketch group. I'm not much of a visual artist. I'm more into music and sound stuff. But I modeled, so I still felt like I contributed and enjoyed the company of everybody there. So they were an important part of our world with all the different people that we hang out with. So thank you.
I
If
don't
there's
know if
anybody
you
else-
can you hear on the Zoom or no?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, I'm Pam Miller. I happen to live in the barn-shaped house. Um, uh, uh, and, you've heard about the sketch group. It spawned people, including like David Mollett and Bill Berry and lots of the notable artists all around town, as well as informal artists. I had about 50 boxes of books up in my library on the upstairs when I rented the cabin, and thankfully it was built like a barn. I wanted to say my favorite memory of Marilyn's about Gordon and mining was when they were to go to Red Devil. She said the only way she would go and bring her 3 kids was if they would ship her piano out to Red Devil Mine. And then they later shipped the piano back. So I appreciated that take on her life out at that, what was then a small town. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Oh, yeah, thank you. The map on the left here is Gordon's underground mine map of the Red Devil Mine. And that's his map, and other government people have published their own maps, but they basically based everything on this map. And a lot of work in there, and it's an incredibly interesting mineral deposit. I mean, it's one of the most interesting ones I've ever seen. It zones down into antimony. Companies are now looking at this as antimony is very critical at this point. The Department of Defense will give you almost any amount of money for antimony, and it's pure antimony at the base. And Gordon found an ore zone in 1960 that kept the mine going for 3 more years. I mean, he found it, and they, in a sense, when he decided to work for the state, he had kind of done his thing. He had found what they needed to have to continue the mining operation. So, if there's anything else, let's just adjourn the meeting. Thank you for showing up and honoring 2 very special people.